At midnight, when the year turned, there were fireworks on the big screen in the village hall and the sound of Old Lang Syne along the street. In the morning the snow was ankle deep, but by noon a hard rain had washed it away. The change came quickly, thick piles of snow falling in on themselves and hurtling away down drains and runoffs to the river bright and loud with it, and the streets left scrubbed and darkly gleaming, and everywhere the first green tips of snowdrops nosing out of the soil. On the television there were pictures of a public search for another missing teenage girl, the volunteers strung out in a line across a hillside, their heads bowed. In April, the first swallows were seen, sweeping low over the pastures in the early evening and taking the insects which rose with the dew. And still, the sound of a helicopter clattering by was never just the sound of a helicopter, but everything that sound had one night meant. The new bracken shoots curled tight, waiting for the lengthening days. August was dry and still, and a dust rose from the fields, and there was a great fear of fire on the hills. In the beechwood the fox cubs were doing their own foraging, and the parents were spending longer away. In the night there were calls back and forth. The edges of the territory were understood. Around the deep pond at the far end of Thompson's land, a ring of willow trees were in full leaf, shielding the pond as though something shameful had once happened there which needed keeping from view. At the cricket ground, the game against Cardwell was lost. The missing girl's name was Rebecca, or Becky, or Bex. She had been looked for everywhere. Dreams were had about her, still. Dreams about her catching a bus to a station and boarding a train which ran out of control. Dreams where she ran down to the road and met a man with a car who took her to a ferry. Dreams about finding her on the night she went missing, stumbling across her on the moor in the lowering dark and helping her back to her parents. In the dreams, the parents said thank you, briefly, and people muttered something about it being no problem at all. And at Christmas, there was carol singing in the church, with candles and the smell of cut yew and holly. Molly Jackson sang a solo verse of Silent Night, her voice trembling a little while her parents watched from opposite ends of the aisle. When she finished, everyone looked down at their sheets to find the words of the second verse. The sound of their singing carried out into the night, down to the river and the school and the cricket ground. The river ran empty and clear, turning beneath the bridge. There were clouds, and the evening was dark, and people moved through the streets with their heads lowered. From the houses the light shone warmly, and in the square the conversation spilled out from the pub. The hills were a dark silhouette. The reservoirs were a flat metallic grey. At the quarry the rope swing hung above the water. Car doors slammed, and someone called goodnight, and the headlights swept across the road, past the allotments, around beyond the beechwood and the visitor centre, and away through the hills. The hills were a dark silhouette. The reservoirs were a flat metallic grey.